32%. That specific figure originates from 2011 genetic research regarding men inhabiting Russia's Republic of North Ossetia-Alania. Investigators tracked Y chromosome markers through hundreds of biological samples. They discovered 32% of North Ossetian males carried distinct genetic signatures. Formal title: Y DNA marker P18. Ancestral lineage: haplogroup G2A1A. No other location within Caucasus territory displayed such frequency. Georgians, lower. Armenians, lower. Chechens, lower. Turks, far lower. Russians, negligible. Western Europeans, virtually absent. 32% among Ossetians, single digits or nothing across remaining regions. That integer grew fascinating for one particular reason. It matches Y DNA results gathered from Joseph Stalin's grandson. That lone percentage occupies center stage regarding genetic puzzles surrounding one of 20th century's most impactful figures. Stalin governed Soviet state during roughly 3 decades. He oversaw collectivization, purges, conflict against Nazi Germany, plus development of an empire spanning 11 time zones. He molded lives of hundreds of millions. His doctrines destroyed millions more. Throughout entire public life, he claimed Georgian identity, Georgian tongue, Georgian mother, Georgian childhood, Georgian Orthodox baptism, Georgian schoolhouse years, Georgian seminary education, Georgian aliases penned for Georgian language poetry journals as youth. But persistent gossip shadowed him through whole career. That hearsay suggested his father, or grandfather, lacked ethnic Georgian roots entirely. That talk indicated different Caucasus population instead. That rumor referenced Ossetia. During most of Stalin's life, that claim sat inside gaps between whispering and proof. No solid data existed. Birth certificates, village archives, Orthodox registry books, all murky, all filtered through tangled Caucasian ethnic politics under late imperial Russia. Then, decades past Stalin's passing, Y DNA study transformed circumstances. Joseph Stalin entered life as Yosef Bessarionis Dzeyugashvili on December 18, 1878, within modest 2-room cottage in Gori, central Georgian town. His birthplace remains standing today. Small stone structure, whitewashed surfaces, timber door, sloped roof. Museum encloses it now, constructed by Soviet officials in 1937 amidst peak of Stalin's personality cult. Gori rests inside valley. Kura River flows nearby. Distant peaks overlook every horizon. Ancient stone stronghold crowns hill over city center. Crimson tile roofs. Cobblestone pathways. Orthodox chapel bells. Stalin's parents lived impoverished. Working class. Beneath working class. His father, Bessarion Dzhukashvili, nicknamed Beso, toiled as shoemaker. He operated personal small workshop once, managing perhaps 10 laborers. But his enterprise produced traditional Georgian footwear, while local fashion embraced European-style boots. His business failed. His wealth vanished. His marriage crumbled simultaneously. His mother, Ekaterine Galadze, called Keke, labored as cleaner and washerwoman to sustain household. She processed laundry from prosperous Gori families. She scrubbed clerical garments. She washed floors for kind neighbors. Beso turned cruel and drunken. He struck Keke. He struck young Ioseb. Finally, Keke escaped with son, moving into priest's home across town. Father Christopher Charkviani provided sanctuary. Young Ioseb utilized Georgian at home. He attended Georgian Orthodox parish school. Neighborhood youths called him So-So, Georgian nickname. He mastered schoolwork. He sang within church choirs. He sketched. He composed verse. At 15, he earned scholarship for Tiflis Spiritual Seminary, one of most esteemed Georgian language religious centers in late Russian Empire. Tiflis, modern Tbilisi, functioned as Georgia's capital. Stone architecture, narrow alleys, mountain vistas. City where Georgian, Russian, Armenian, and Azerbaijani residents mixed inside tight quarters. Yosef entered seminary rooms in August 1894. 600 aspiring priests. 20 or 30 youths per dorm chamber. Uncomfortable wooden frames. frozen winters, rigid control. He crafted poetry using Georgian during those periods. 5 teenage works appeared in literary journal named Iveria, meaning Georgia, using pseudonym Sosolo. His rhymes praised native soil, Georgian vistas, Georgian national pride. Editor Ilya Chavchavadze, prominent Georgian patriot, hailed them as gifted pieces. Some later entered Georgian poetic collections. Through every cultural lens, young Ioseb Yugashvili seemed Georgian, but his patronymic drew scrutiny. Zhukashvili, name whose definition experts debated for centuries. Some Georgian philologists claimed Zhukha stemmed from ancient Georgian term meaning steel, fitting for cobbler's kin. Others disagreed. Mikhail Veskov, honored linguist, offered a different source entirely. Per his research, Zhukha came from Ossetian word signifying flock of sheep. He observed that Jugayev stays frequent Ossetian surname today. He noted Christianized Ossetians dwelling in Georgia often modified names into Georgian forms, adding Oshvili, Georgian suffix meaning offspring, of. Jugashvili, per this interpretation, Georgianized Ossetian family name. That view wasn't fresh to Stalin's own age. Rumors of Ossetian blood moved through Tbilisi activist circles during youth. They pulsed inside Russian imperial police dossiers while he lived as hunted Bolshevik. They drifted within Kremlin halls after he seized power. They echoed, most famously, through a poem. Hearsay about Stalin's paternal line trailed him forever. In November 1933, Russian writer Osip Mandelstam composed brief 16-line satire attacking Stalin. Mandelstam already stood as major icon in Russian letters. Silver Age author, associate of Anna Akhmatova and Boris Pasternak. Jewish scholar residing in Moscow flat on Nashchokin Lane, observed constantly by Soviet security. Then Mandelstam recited that poem at tiny secret meetings. Group size, about 11 individuals. Lounges, kitchen counters, muted tones, teacups steaming on wooden planks. Within that satire, Mandelstam labeled Stalin Kremlin mountaineer, peasant killer, plus used particular term, Osset, hinting at Ossetian lineage. That word served as sharp jab. Mandelstam recognized those rumors. Educated Russians recognized those rumors. Georgians recognized those rumors. Someone at those clandestine readings betrayed Mandelstam. He faced arrest on May 13, 1934. NKVD operatives reached his Moscow residence at midnight. They searched for hours. They took him away in darkness. His wife Nadezhda watched from a doorway, holding her coat together in cold night air. First exile. 3 years inside a remote town called Sherdin, deep inside Ural region. He attempted suicide there. He was transferred to Voronezh, a slightly less harsh city. He continued writing poetry in secret. Brief return to Moscow in 1937. Immediate rearrest in May 1938. Transfer to a transit camp near Vladivostok on Pacific coast. Wooden barracks, wire fences, Siberian cold. Death that December 27, 1938, aged 47 inside that freezing camp. Official cause, typhus. Real cause, starvation, exposure, and years of state persecution. His widow Nadezhda Mandelstam memorized all his poems to preserve them. She recited them in her head, daily, for decades. She wrote them down only after Stalin's death. Her memoir, Hope Against Hope, published in 1970, documented that entire ordeal. Russian readers smuggled copies between hands for years. Stalin himself denied those Ossetian rumors consistently. Inside official Soviet biographies, his ancestry appeared as purely Georgian. His own short course history and his approved biographical materials stressed Georgian peasant stock, Georgian Orthodox faith, Georgian cultural roots. But within Caucasus itself, whispers continued. Several historians have noted that Stalin's public behavior toward Ossetians grew suspicious over time. He authorized forced relocations of Caucasian peoples during wartime. South Ossetia and North Ossetia underwent political restructuring under his rule. His attitudes toward Georgian national identity were often harsher than toward any other Soviet nationality. Was Stalin overcompensating? hiding something his generation of Caucasians had always suspected. Historians still debate that question. Evidence remains indirect. Stalin's personal files stayed locked inside Soviet archives for decades, and fragments that emerged after 1991 added complexity without closure. Soviet propaganda never mentioned Ossetia in connection with Stalin. Soviet history textbooks never mentioned those rumors. Soviet cinema portrayed young Stalin as purely Georgian. Georgian-speaking actors, Georgian village settings, Georgian Orthodox imagery. That public narrative hardened into official truth across 6 decades of Stalinist and post-Stalinist historiography. For decades, that rumor sat inside a gap between genealogy and genetics. Historians could argue about surnames. Linguists could argue about etymologies. Old Bolshevik memoirs, mostly burned, censored, or forcibly rewritten during Stalin's purges, offered fragments, contradictions, denials. None of those sources could provide actual evidence. A family tree is not a blood test. A village rumor is not a laboratory result. What changed that situation was Y chromosome science. Y DNA passes from father to son with almost no change across generations. A tiny portion of human genome, inherited through a single line. That narrow inheritance pattern makes Y DNA extremely valuable for tracing paternal ancestry backward through time. Stalin had 2 sons who lived past infancy. Older son, Yakov Djugashvili, born 1907 to Stalin's first wife, Ekaterina Svanidze. Yakov served as a Red Army artillery officer during World War II. Captured by German forces in July 1941 during early months of Operation Barbarossa, imprisoned inside Sachsenhausen concentration camp near Berlin. Reports suggest Germans offered to exchange Yakov for a captured German general. Stalin reportedly refused. "I will not trade a field marshal for a lieutenant," he allegedly said, though historians debate whether that exact exchange occurred. Yakov died inside that German camp in April 1943, age 36, cause disputed. Some sources say he was shot by guards after running toward camp fence. Others suggest suicide. He had 1 son, Yevgeny Djugashvili, who survived. Younger son, Vasily Stalin, born 1921 to Stalin's second wife, Nadezhda Alliluyeva. Vasily grew up inside Kremlin privilege. He joined Soviet Air Force. He rose quickly through ranks, partly on merit, partly on surname. Alcoholism dogged him throughout adult life. After Stalin's 1953 death, political protection disappeared. Vasily was demoted, imprisoned briefly, and ultimately exiled to Kazan. He died in 1962, aged 41, of heart failure likely accelerated by heavy drinking. Vasily had several children, among them Alexander Vasilievich Burdonsky. Alexander was born on October 14, 1941, as Alexander Stalin. His parents divorced when he was young. His mother Galina remarried. He took his stepfather's surname, Burdonsky. That change proved useful. After Khrushchev's 1956 secret speech denounced Stalin, life as Stalin's grandson grew complicated. Life as Burdonsky allowed room to build an independent career. Alexander Burdonsky was Stalin's grandson. He chose a different path than his father or grandfather. He became a theater director. He trained at Moscow State Institute of Theatrical Arts. Graduation, 1971. First assignments at Russian Army Theater inside central Moscow. Red brick facade, wide stone steps, columned entrance. He would remain at that theater for nearly 5 decades. Moscow stages. Russian Army Theater specifically. He directed more than 20 plays over his career. Serious dramatic work. Shakespeare adaptations, original Russian plays, psychological dramas. Critics respected him. Fellow directors respected him. Actors who worked with him described him as patient, demanding, and quietly humorous. Awards followed. In 1996, Russia named him a People's Artist, a senior cultural honor equivalent to a knighthood. He rarely spoke publicly about his grandfather. Interviews show a quiet, thoughtful man. Gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, measured speech. He carried Stalin's face visibly, same wide cheekbones, same narrow dark eyes, same heavy brow. Photographs prove that resemblance. "I had a difficult childhood," Berdansky once told a Russian interviewer. "Being Stalin's grandson was not something anyone should want." At some point, date imprecise inside public records, Berdansky submitted a Y-DNA sample for genetic analysis. Laboratory used: Family Tree DNA, a consumer-facing genealogy company based in Houston, Texas. His sample entered an Ossetian DNA research project designed to map paternal lineages across Caucasus populations. That project has collected samples from dozens of Ossetian volunteers and compared them against Georgian, Armenian, Abkhaz, and Circassian reference populations. Berdansky died on May 23, 2017, aged 75. Cause: cancer. His genetic results survived him. They remain inside family tree DNA databases, accessible to researchers studying Caucasus genetic history. Berdansky's Y-DNA sample, when analyzed, placed his paternal line into Y chromosome haplogroup G2A1AA1. Breaking down that technical label requires some context. Humans carry DNA inside every cell. Most of that DNA mixes with each new generation, as mothers and fathers pass half their genome each to their children. But one small portion stays unchanged. That unchanged portion is Y chromosome. Only men carry a Y chromosome. Fathers pass it to sons. Sons pass it to grandsons. Across generations, with only tiny random mutations accumulating, a Y chromosome can stay recognizable for thousands of years. Genetic scientists have mapped Y chromosome variations across human populations worldwide. They group them into haplogroups, major paternal lineages labeled with letters and numbers. Haplogroup A, haplogroup B, through to haplogroup T. Each haplogroup has subgroups. Each subgroup has its own smaller branches. Every man alive today carries some Y haplogroup inherited unchanged from his father. That haplogroup traces a direct male line backward through history. Stalin carried haplogroup G2A1A1. G2A1A1 is a branch of a larger family, haplogroup G2A1. That larger family has a geographical fingerprint that is almost startlingly specific. Haplogroup G2A1 has extremely low frequency across almost every world population, except inside one region, Caucasus Mountains. A 2011 study led by Oleg Balanovsky at Russian Academy of Sciences mapped this pattern in detail. His team sampled men across Caucasus: Ossetians, Abkhazians, Circassians, Georgians, Armenians, Chechens, and others. They measured frequencies of specific haplogroups inside each population. Results showed a clear pattern. Haplogroup G2A1, and particularly its P18-defined subgroup, was a hallmark of Caucasus paternal ancestry. But within Caucasus itself, frequencies varied dramatically. North Ossetians, 32% carried P18. Abkhazians, 16% carried P18. Circassians inside Karachay-Cherkessia, 8% carried PAS18. Elsewhere inside Caucasus, negligible or small percentages. Those numbers reveal something specific about Ossetian paternal genetic history. Ossetians speak an Iranian language, unlike their Caucasus neighbors who speak Kartvelian, Northwest Caucasian, or Northeast Caucasian languages. Ossetian ancestry traces partly to ancient Alans, an Iranian-speaking steppe people who migrated into Caucasus Mountains during late antiquity. Their paternal gene pool preserved distinctive patterns across centuries of isolation inside mountain valleys. Inside Caucasus, G2A1 shows up as a major component of local paternal ancestry. Ossetians, particularly North Ossetians, very high frequency. Abkhazians, notable frequency. Savans inside Georgia, significant frequency. Circassians, moderate frequency. Ethnic Georgians, especially majority Kartvelian-speaking populations inside lowland Georgia, much lower frequency than Ossetians. Georgian Y-DNA shows greater diversity, with stronger representation of haplogroups J1, J2, and R1b. That pattern is not random. Human genetic geography, when examined carefully, traces patterns that reflect thousands of years of human movement, mountain isolation, and population continuity. Stalin's Y chromosome, inherited from his father Bessarion, inherited from Bessarion's father, inherited from Bessarion's grandfather, pointed specifically toward a Caucasus lineage strongly associated with Ossetian paternal ancestry. Think about what that actually means. Joseph Stalin identified publicly as Georgian. He spoke Georgian. He wrote Georgian poetry. He attended Georgian Orthodox churches. He carried Georgian cultural markers inside every visible layer of his biography. But his paternal DNA, the single piece of genetic information that passes almost unchanged from father to son across generations, carried a signature most common inside a different Caucasus people entirely. That finding does not prove his paternal grandfather was Ossetian. Y-DNA haplogroups trace back thousands of years. Caucasus populations have mixed, migrated, and intermarried across millennia. Several alternative explanations remain possible. First possibility: Stalin's paternal line entered Georgia from Ossetia recently, perhaps within a few centuries, and integrated culturally into Georgian village life while retaining its original genetic signature. Second possibility: Stalin's ancestors lived inside a region of ethnic mixing, South Ossetia, Western Kartli, Imereti, where Ossetian and Georgian families had long shared territory, and carried Ossetian-associated Y-DNA, while culturally identifying as Georgian for generations. Third possibility: haplogroup G2A1A1 existed inside some Georgian populations too, at lower frequencies, and Stalin's specific ancestor happened to carry this less common Georgian variant. All three remain possible. Y-DNA alone cannot distinguish between them with certainty. But one thing Y-DNA can do is rule out certain scenarios. Stalin's paternal line was not typical ethnic Georgian stock. That much is clear from haplogroup data. Whatever cultural identity his family carried, their paternal genetic signature differed from majority ethnic Georgians. Surname evidence aligns with this. Village traditions align with this. Linguistic analysis of Djughashvili aligns with this. Rumors that followed Stalin throughout his life align with this. All of that would have been dismissed as speculation 40 years ago. With Y-DNA in hand, it becomes something closer to a pattern. Some implications of this finding extend beyond genetics. First implication: Stalin's denials take on a different weight. If rumors he spent his life denying turn out to carry a legitimate genetic basis, his consistent public insistence on Georgian-only ancestry looks strategic rather than honest. A man who built his political identity around Georgian peasant authenticity had reason to bury any suggestion his paternal line was something different. Soviet cultural politics made ethnic origin matter. Georgian origin matched his public story. Ossetian origin complicated it. Second implication: Mandelstam's 1933 epigram, which killed him, may have been referencing something real. That reference was enough to warrant execution. Educated Soviets of Mandelstam's generation likely knew. Stalin himself likely knew. His response, not denial alone, but elimination of anyone who voiced that truth, suggests awareness of vulnerability. Nadezhda Mandelstam wrote later, after decades of exile and widowhood, that poetry inside Soviet Union became a matter of life and death. Mandelstam's epigram became a centerpiece of that pattern. 16 lines, 11 listeners, 1 informer, 4 years of exile, 1 death inside a transit camp. A Y-DNA result, published decades after everyone involved had died, provides partial vindication for Mandelstam's artistic instinct. He had written something true. He had paid ultimate price for writing it. Third implication: Stalin's treatment of Caucasian nationalities during his rule deserves fresh examination. Harsh Georgian policies, structural changes to Ossetian territories, wartime deportations of other Caucasus groups, Chechens, Ingush, Balkars, Karachay, Crimean Tatars. Those deportations killed hundreds of thousands. Survivors spent decades inside Central Asian exile. Was some of that harshness driven by his own conflicted identity? Historians will debate that question for decades. No simple causal chain exists. Stalin's brutality extended far beyond Caucasus policy. Millions of Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, Jews, and countless other Soviet populations suffered under his rule. His cruelty was not selectively ethnic. But inside Caucasus specifically, his policies carried an Hosik's edge that some historians have long suspected was personal. Fourth implication, a quieter one. Claims about hidden Ossetian roots are not a modern invention. They are as old as Stalin's public career. Late Imperial Russian police reports mentioned them. Georgian Marxist circles gossiped about them. Foreign diplomats reported them. Mandelstam encoded them inside verse. Exiled Georgian émigré communities carried them abroad during Soviet era. What was missing, until recently, was evidence. Y-DNA analysis of Alexander Berdonsky provided that evidence. It does not prove everything. No single Y-DNA result ever does. But it transforms a 130-year-old rumor from gossip into a defensible hypothesis backed by molecular data. Science changes what questions we can ask. Science changes what questions we can answer. That shift, from rumor to testable claim, represents quiet work of modern genetics applied to historical questions. There are legitimate caveats. Sample size, 1 grandson. A single Y-DNA result carries 1 paternal line. That line extends backward through Stalin's father, grandfather, great-grandfather. It does not speak to any other ancestral lines. Not Stalin's mother, Ekaterine Galatz's line, not his paternal grandmother's line, not his maternal grandfather's. Those lines may well have been thoroughly Georgian. A full autosomal analysis, combining all ancestral contributions, would likely show Stalin as majority Georgian by ancestry, with notable Ossetian paternal input. Haplogroup boundaries. G2A1A1 does exist, in small numbers, inside ethnic Georgians too. Not every G2A1A1 carrier is Ossetian. Frequencies differ, but overlap exists. Caucasian populations have shared this landscape for thousands of years. Clean ethnic genetic boundaries do not exist anywhere inside Caucasus. Haplogroup age. G2A1 and A1 is an old lineage. Common ancestors lived thousands of years ago. A modern Y-DNA signature says something about deep paternal ancestry, not necessarily about ethnic self-identity of immediate ancestors. Stalin's great-great-grandfather may have already considered himself Georgian, regardless of deeper Ossetian origins. And finally, identity itself. Caucasian ethnic boundaries have always been porous. Georgian and Ossetian villages coexisted for centuries inside regions like South Ossetia and Western Kartli. Intermarriage was common. Cultural adoption was common. Linguistic shifts happened within families across a few generations. A person could carry Ossetian Y-DNA while being genuinely, fully, completely culturally Georgian. So this is not a story about secret ethnic identity. It is a story about secret genetic geography, and about how science, applied patiently to a century-old question, can offer answers people who first asked that question never lived to receive. Stalin died on March 5, 1953, inside his dacha at Kuntsevo, outside Moscow. Stroke. Age 74. He had collapsed alone. His guards feared disturbing him. Hours passed before anyone entered his room. By then, brain damage was irreversible. He died lying on a couch, surrounded by doctors who arrived too late. His body lay inside Lenin's mausoleum for 8 years, beside Lenin himself. Millions of Soviet citizens visited that red granite tomb on Red Square. Mourners wept. Soldiers stood guard. Eternal flames burned nearby. After Khrushchev's 1961 de-Stalinization campaign, Stalin's body got removed and buried quietly beside Kremlin Wall. A simple marble bust. A granite plaque, his name in Russian. A small headstone among other Soviet leaders lying along that wall. Soviet workers carried his body out at night. No public ceremony. No announcements in newspapers. By morning, his place inside Lenin's mausoleum had simply disappeared. His paternal DNA, unknown to him during his life, now sits inside a genetic database. A marker on a chart. A haplogroup designation. G2A1A1. Caucasus specific. Ossetian concentrated. Georgian adjacent. 1 line of data. 1 quiet correction, 8 decades after his death, to a story he spent his entire life telling in a different shape. Alexander Berdonsky, theater director, grandson, quiet man, inheritor of a world historical Y chromosome, died 4 years ago inside Moscow. His genetic result outlasted him. It sits alongside thousands of other samples inside Family Tree DNA's Ossetian Project database. It contributes to ongoing research into Caucasus paternal history. Osip Mandelstam's poem outlasted him too. His widow's memory preserved it. Russian readers memorized it. Western translators rendered it into dozens of languages. That 16-line epigram, written in November 1933, performed for 11 people, recorded on slips of paper Mandelstam burned immediately afterward. It survived. It survived Stalin's terror. It survived Stalin. It survived Soviet Union. It survives today, reprinted inside Russian poetry anthologies, analyzed by scholars, quoted at academic conferences. Mandelstam's instinct, as it turns out, was correct. Rumors, he referenced in that dangerous verse, had substance behind them. Science has now confirmed what poetry suggested. That is how history sometimes works. Quietly. Slowly. Decades after relevant historical actors have left stage. 1 sample, 1 analysis, 1 laboratory result. Evidence, finally, for rumors that men and women risked their lives to whisper, 80 years ago, across small rooms in a city ruled by a man who called himself Georgian. Research continues. More testing across Caucasus populations continues. Deeper analysis of G2A1A1 subclades continues. Better understanding of Ossetian paternal history continues. A newer sample from another direct Stalin descendant, if one ever becomes available, would strengthen or complicate this finding further. Stalin's grave sits inside a quiet corner beside Kremlin Wall. Tourists photograph it. School children walk past it. Occasional flowers appear on its granite. Russian debates about his legacy continue, unresolved after 7 decades. His paternal DNA sits inside genetic databases, quietly, precisely, permanently, readable by anyone with laboratory access and a question worth asking. Both remain. Both still have things to say. Some rumors, given enough time, become measurements. Joseph Stalin spent his entire life insisting on a specific version of his origins. His grandson's Y DNA offered 1 small correction to that version, measured quietly inside a laboratory by scientists who had no particular interest in 20th century Soviet politics. Just another haplogroup data point added to a Caucasus research database, alongside thousands of others. History sometimes moves through tiny, precise measurements. This is one of them. A man, a rumor, a grandson, a laboratory, a result.